Hello, Math 7 students. This is an introduction to percent equations, which I call percent increase and decrease. So, some of this is going to look really familiar because some of these problems were the same types of ones that we did a couple days ago in a different lesson. On the other lesson, we were drawing models. In this lesson, we're not going to draw models. We're going to start working towards percent equations. So, Larry has a piece of rope that is 12 feet long. He cuts off 25% of the rope. Question 1, how much did Larry cut off? After we know that, how long is the rope now? We're going to pause the recording as students work on this, and then we'll come back together and do parts A and B together, but students in class should work on this by themselves first. How much did Larry cut off? Stephen? Great. What this question is really asking is, what is 25% of the original amount, which is 12? 25% is 0.25. Of means we're multiplying, and so we're multiplying by 12. And 0.25 times 12 is equal to the new amount, and the new amount, no, I'm sorry, it's not the new amount, it is the amount that he cut off. The amount he cut off is equal to 3. So, what is that new amount? If he started at 12 and he cut off 3 feet of that rope, how long is that rope now? 12 minus 3 is equal to, Aaliyah? 9. The rope is now 9 feet long. How can we find out how long his rope is now in just one step instead of 2? Eyes on the screen. We saw this in our last lesson. This 12 feet is the original amount. Will you please label that original? If it's the original amount, that's 100%. That's where we're starting. What are we doing with that 100%? Luis? Yeah, we're cutting off 25%. So in other words, since it's being cut off, that's going to be a reduction, a subtraction. Okay, I'm going to just move that on down here. The original amount is 100%. We're reducing that amount by 25%, so I subtract 25%. What is 100% minus 25%? That's 75%. Understand what that means, though. This 75% is 75% of the original amount. What does that mean? That means I'm going to be calculating with 75% instead. If I want to do this in one step, 75% is 0.75. Of still means to multiply. And what is that original amount? 12. Type that into your calculator. 0.75 times 12 is equal to, Kale. Surprise, surprise. Same thing that we got before. It's 9 feet. But we did it in one step instead of 2. When I say one step, let me clarify. Do you see this part right here? I'm writing that out so you understand when I randomly start calculating with 75, you know where that comes from. But could you do 100% minus 25% equals 75% in your head? Yeah. Eventually, we're probably not going to write this down anymore. This is something that it's a calculation we can do in our head. However, since we're doing math practice 3 and we're constructing our own viable arguments and we're showing our work, we are going to show this step. But this is a step that we don't need a calculator for. It's one that we can do it in our head. We're just writing it down so that we know where these numbers come from. Once I know that it's 75% of the original, then I can do the calculation. Here, 2 steps. Step 1, we first have to find out how much he cut off. Step 2, then I can see how long the rope is. We did this in actually both of our last two lessons with the model, not a perfect model, but here's that full original amount. We find 25% and we cut it off. That's how we see 100% minus that 25% is that 75%. Right? So it's the same type of thing that we've done with our model. It's the same type of thing that we've seen in the last couple of lessons. We're just starting to move away from the model so that we can do it just in our calculator. Try the next one, please. Larry goes to the hardware store and buys a wooden plank that is 25% longer than his 12-foot long rope. Larry's wooden plank is how much longer than his rope? Part B, how long is Larry's wooden plank? Part C, after we do these two steps, let's practice. How can we have done that in just one step instead of two? Okay, A, B, and C with your groups. We're going to pause the recording again. How long is Larry's rope? Kale. No, his rope is 12 feet long. Since his rope is 12 feet long and his wooden plank is 25% longer than that, I'm curious to know how much longer is the plank compared to the rope. Since his rope is 25% longer, I first need to find 25% of the original amount. Just like our cereal box yesterday, 35% more. We need to figure out what 35% of the original amount is. Now it's 25% more. We first need to find 25% of the original, which it lists as 12 feet. You have already done this calculation. You did it right here. 0.25 times 12 is equal to 3 feet. How much longer is the plank than the rope? 3 feet long. 3 feet longer. If that's the case, how long is Larry's wooden plank? Well, since we know the original rope is 12 feet, and we know that this rope is an additional 3 feet, 12 feet plus 3 feet is equal to 15 feet. Again, if we were drawing a model, we would have a model which represents the 100%, the original amount. I would need to find out what 25% of that is. Once I find that 25%, which we did, it's 3, that's what is tacked onto the end. So how do I do this in one step? 100% plus an extra 25% is equal to 125%. That means this new amount, when I compare the new amount to the original, it's 125% of the original. 125% is the decimal 1.25. Of means to multiply, and the original amount is 12. 12.25 times 12, type it into your calculator and you get 15. That is one step instead of two. It might feel like 2 steps because we did this part, but remember, we don't need our calculator for this part. You probably say, I didn't need my calculator for this either, or even for this, but you probably will for some of these other ones. No matter what, you can do 100% plus 25% or 100% minus 25%. You don't need your calculator for that. The next one, Lydia invested $150. Lydia earned 10% on her investment. Part A, how much did she earn? After we find out how much she earned, I can then ask the question, how much money does she have now? Well, she still has the $150, but then she would have earned money, so I think we would know what to do in that problem. Don't answer part C yet. You guys are too focused on this. We're not quite ready for that yet. Please focus on parts A and B first. If you are looking for something to do to fill your time, instead of moving on to C, will you please move on to 4A and B? We're going to pause the recording while students work on this in class and then come back together. Lydia invested $150. That's the original amount. Lydia earned 10% on her investment. So if I want to know how much she earned, I'm asking what is 10% of that original amount, which is $150. So I would be typing into my calculator 0.1 or 0.10. Of means to multiply, and the original amount is $150. Are you writing this down? Did you already write it down? What is 0.10 times 150 entered into your calculator? Seth. 15. How much did Lydia earn on her investment? She earned $15. How much money does she have now? Remember how she started off with $150? Remember how she just earned $15? Now she has $165. Landon also invested $150. Landon earned 15% on his investment. How much did Landon earn? Again, the same process is, I'm asking what is 15% of $150? 15% is 0.15. Of means to multiply, and we're multiplying by $150. When I type that into my calculator, what do I get? Brooklyn. Thank you. That means Landon earned 22.5, which really means Landon earned $22.50. How much money does Landon have now? He started off with $150, but he just earned 22.5. That means Landon now has, Aaliyah? Yes. How can we do this in one step instead of two? This is where when I draw that model and bring it in, it can be helpful. Here's that 100%. But once I figure out what 10% is, what do I do with that 10%? I tack it on to the end, right? 100% plus 10% is equal to 110%. So, to do this in one step, instead of first finding 10% and then adding it, I just want to know what is 115% of the original amount. Because 110% of the original amount is going to be the new total. Type that into your calculators then. 110% of the original amount. Or in other words, 1.1, because that's what this is as a decimal, 110% is 1.1 or even 1.10 if you want. Of means to multiply, and the original amount is $150. When you type this into your calculator, I'm going to bet you get 165. We can get to the same place in just one step instead of taking these 2 steps. Finish this one up. What is that going to look like? Come back to me. 100% plus 15%, as you know, is equal to 115%. So I want to know, what is 115% of the original amount? We type into our calculator 1.15 of, which means multiply, and the original amount is 150. So I'm typing in 1.15 times 150, and I get what, Gabe? Yep, $172.50. The same thing that I got before, but in one calculation in the calculator instead of 2. We're going to skip number 5 for right now. Things got out of order. There we go. You guys have Rico and Ruby next, right? Okay. Rico invested $350. Rico also earned 10% on his investment. So once again, we have our original amount of $350 and we have an earning of 10%. How much did Rico earn? Once again, that means what we're asking is, what is 10% of 350? 10% of the original amount, 350. Or in other words, 10%, 0.1 or 0.10. Of means that we're multiplying, and we're multiplying by 350. So we plug that into our calculator and we get the earnings. That would be 35. So $35 earned. How much money does Rico have now? Well, Rico still has his $350 investment. In addition to that $350 investment, he has an additional, that means I'm adding $35. So 350 plus $35 is equal to $385 total. How can we do this in one step? Again, this is where that model really helps solidify. And again, my models are not perfect. They're not showing all of the details. I just want you to know this represents that 100%. But Rico earned 10% extra. So that 10% extra goes on in addition to that, which means the amount that I have now is 110%. So I have 110% of what we started with, 110% of the original. And so to do this in one single step, because again, I can do this in my head, 100% plus 10% is equal to 110%. I now have 1.1 or 1.10 times the original amount, which is 350. Repeat that process for 7A, B, and C, and only continue once you have done that on your own. Ruby invested $350. Ruby earned 15%. So invested the same amount as Rico, but Ruby earned 15% this time. So what does this mean? How much did Ruby earn? We want 15% of 350. What is 15% of 350? 15% is 0.15. Of means we're multiplying, and we're multiplying by the original amount of 350. Type that into your calculator, and we get 5250. That means Ruby earned $52.50. With that in mind, how much does she have now? Ruby still has her initial $350. She has her additional $52.50 for a grand total now of $402.50. We had to do that in 2 steps. We first found out how much Ruby earned, then we added it to the original amount. How can I do that in 1 step? With the understanding that when this represents 100% and I find that 15%, I'm going to take that 15% and tack it on to the end. So 100% with an additional 15% means I have 115% of the original. Let me write that down. 115% of the original. Let's pause for a second. Where does this 115% come from? Where does that come from? 100% plus 15% is equal to that 115%. So notice I'm still showing my work in some way, shape, or form. I understand where this, what might seem random, 1.15 comes from because I added those together and showed my work for that. 1.15 times the original amount of 350. Type that into your calculator, and in one single calculation, without having to break it up into these 2 steps, in one single calculation, I still get that same 402.50 that I got before. Now, 9 and 10 are very similar. Here's the only difference for problems 9 and 10. Eliza invested $350. Eliza lost 10% on her investment. This time, it's a loss of 10%. We still have our initial investment of $350. We want to know what that 10% is. 350, let me back up, 10% of 350. Or in other words, 0.10 multiplied by 350. We already did that calculation up above, so the calculation itself isn't new. Even though it's a new problem, the calculation isn't new. How much did Rico earn? 10% of 350. How much did Eliza earn? 10% of 350. Only it's not earnings, actually, it's loss. But the first calculation is the same. We know that that is equal to $35. What do I do in this next step? How much money does she have now? Well, she started off with that 350, but this time, this amount right here is not $35 earned. This is $35 lost. So since it's lost, that means I'm now going to subtract that amount. 350 minus the amount she lost is her new amount of $315. How do we do this in 1 step? Envision that model. Here's 100%. We first find that 10%, and when I find that 10%, this time it's taken out of that model. That is no longer there. So it was a bar that represented 100%, but that 100% was reduced by 10%. So 100% take away that 10% is equal to 90%. That means when Eliza loses 10% of her money, that means she only has 90% of the original amount left. 90% of the original. What does that mean? That means instead of doing these 2 calculations, I can just do 90% or 0.9. Of means to multiply, and the original amount is 350. So I can type into my calculator 0.9 times 350 in one single calculation is equal to $315. Give that a try with 10. Pause the recording. Apply the same concepts that we've been seeing again and again and again. This time, Elijah lost 15% on his initial $350 investment. Pause the recording and give that a try on your own first. All right, now that you've given it a try, let's go over it and see how you did. How much did Elijah lose? Elijah lost 15% of that 350. So if I want to know how much he lost, I type into my calculator 0.15 times 350 and 0.15 times 350. Remember, that's the same calculation that we did before. You can see it up here. Same calculation. So even though it's a different problem, we can reuse that same calculation from above. 52.5. The difference in this problem is that is the amount that Elijah lost. So when I want to know how much money does Elijah have now, he started with his 350. He lost $52.50. So now he has $297.50. That was a lot of work doing that in 2 steps. How can we do it in 1? When I start with 100%, and I first find out what 15% of that is, I then take that and subtract it. So 100% minus the 15% is equal to what I have left right here, and what I have left right here is 85%. 100% minus 15% is 85%. So how do we do this in 1 step? I just want to know, well, what's 85% of the original? 85%, 0.85 of means we're multiplying, and the original amount is 350. In 1 single calculation then, we end up with the same answer as we did before. Typing this into the calculator, we have $297.50. Now, I'm not going to talk about the 11 and 12. What I want us to really take away from all of this lesson is how we can do this in 1 step. Even if you prefer to do this in 2 steps, we're going to reach problems in the future where we have to know what this process is. So, even if you like doing it this way, I want you to stretch and I want you to grow and I want you to practice doing it in this 1-step method because of what is going to be happening in our very next lesson. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.